You've probably heard about 80-20 or the 80-20 principle, but do you know how to use it? That's what I'm going to cover in this video. You'll learn how to decide what you should do and what you shouldn't. And neither of these things is obvious, so be sure that you watch the video all the way to the end. In a nutshell, the 80-20 principle says that with a little bit of effort in the right things, you can get big results. It's not how to get rich quickly. Instead, it's how to use your time, money, and other resources the most effectively. Because whether your actions are deliberate or not, the principle doesn't change. The outcome will always be the same, and so to use it correctly, you have to understand what the mechanism is and how it works. The 80-20 principle has always been true, but it was first described by Vilfredo Pareto, a late 19th and early 20th century Italian economist. He noticed that about 20% of the people in the world owned around 80% of the wealth that it contained. The people, what they did was the input, and the output was what they got as a result. And that was about 80% of what was available. The opposite is also true. It takes 80% of your potential input in order to get the remaining 20% of your output. It has to add up to 100% for both input and output. If 20% of input gives you 80% of output, then the remaining 80% of your input, whatever it is, can only give you the leftover 20% of output. The ratios can vary, but the principle is that if you do the right things and avoid the wrong ones, then you'll get the most results through a comparatively small amount of effort. And you know this to be true from your own experience. For example, 20% of your income covers 80% of your bills, and the remaining 80% of your income is used for only 20% of your bills. If you routinely pay 10 bills in a month, then 2 of them will use up about 80% of your income. Your mortgage and car payments together could do that. The remaining 20% of your income then goes to pay smaller bills such as utilities, groceries, gas, and incidentals. 20% of your customers will give you 80% of your complaints, and 80% of your customers will make up only 20% of the remaining complaints. This is why problem customers are often fired by their suppliers. Entrepreneurs would rather forfeit the income that they get from the troublemakers than to have to deal with the aggravation they cause. The problems they create have a higher emotional, if not monetary cost than the income they provide. In terms of productivity, 20% of the time you spend working gives you 80% of what you accomplish. That means that in a typical 40-hour week, just 8 hours will give you more than 3/4 of your weekly results. And the reverse of that is also worth thinking about. You'll spend the remaining 32 hours of your work week in order to accomplish 20% of what you think needs to be done. This is where many efficiencies can often be found. By asking yourself what you do that gives you the least benefit, you can identify those things that should be outsourced or omitted altogether. And it doesn't stop there. Perry Marshall observed that you can apply 80-20 to every 80-20 indefinitely. What would that look like? Well, you'd take 20% of that first 20% and 80% of that first 80%, and that would make the ratio 4% and 64%. So 4% of your most troublesome customers give you 64% of your business headaches. 4% of your customers give you 64% of your income. And 4% of your work gives you 64% of your results. 4% of your time based on a 40-hour work week is 96 minutes. And it means that if the principle holds true, then you can get 64% of your work done in a little over an hour and a half. This is why so many managers come to work an hour or two early before everyone else arrives. It's because they know from personal experience that they can get more done in that short amount of uninterrupted time than they can during the rest of the day. Let's apply this formula one more time. 20% of 4% is 0.8%, a minute quantity. In terms of time, it amounts to less than 20 minutes in a 40-hour week. 80% of 64% is about 51%. And you'll find that depending on the level of concentration that you can muster and the task at hand, that even in that short amount of time, you can get a great deal accomplished, as much as half of the most important work that you do in a week. These numbers aren't exact in every case. They're an approximation. For some things, it might be 95 and 5, such as with income and the wealth of the world, or 70-30. The principle, however, is that it takes a comparatively small amount of one thing to produce a much larger amount of something else. Small inputs can yield big results, and large inputs tend to yield much smaller results. No matter how you look at it, the results are disproportionately large or small when compared to the input. And that's why the 80-20 principle is so powerful. It can help you to decide what you should spend your time, money, and other resources on. But it's also valuable for showing you what you shouldn't spend it on. Here's how that works. Suppose you're a fast learner. You're able to do what you set out to do most of the time without much effort. For you, it requires no more than about 20% of your effort to get 80% of your results most of the time. But then you come up against something that challenges you. You give it your usual 20% and nothing happens. Then you give it 30% and still nothing happens. Because you're not accustomed to defeat, you keep upping the ante. Eventually, you reach a point where you're giving it all you've got. Still no results. At this point, you have to make a decision. You have to decide if accomplishing this thing is worth the apparent effort that's required to get it. A lot of people give up on their dreams because they underestimate what they have to do to get them. For them, the price is too high, and so they give up. It's also possible that the thing that you're working on so hard will never give you the results that you want. In that case, you should look at ways to outsource it or stop doing it altogether. Things for which this is true are found in that opposite category, where 80% or more of your effort only gives you 20% or even less of the results that you want. And this is how you use 80-20. Although it's valuable as a tool to help you identify the things that give you the greatest results, it's much more valuable for showing you what you shouldn't be doing at all. In fact, in the grand scheme of things, you might be just knocking yourself out for no other reason than personal pride. Some people will persist when there's no reason to do so, simply because they're proud of themselves for never giving in. It takes wisdom to know when to change course, and you should never let faith in your own abilities blind you from the fact that you're on the wrong path. The next time you encounter what seems like a minor challenge, but which ultimately stops you in your tracks, ask yourself this: what is the worst thing that could happen if I don't figure this out? If it's only that your pride will be slightly wounded, then leave it. It's probably not important. If, on the other hand, it's the key to taking the next step, then press on. But remember that some things will take longer to do than you originally thought. And remember this too: even smart people have to work hard. How hard you have to work on something, anything, isn't the criterion for whether you should do it at all. The only criterion is the value that you'll get from doing it is proportional to the effort you have to make. And that's because the 80-20 principle always holds true. If you have to put in a lot of effort in order to accomplish something, then what you achieve needs to be at least 4 times more valuable to you than what you put in. If it's less than that, then either you've misjudged the value of the outcome, or you're wasting your resources on something that, at best, can only give you 1/4 of the results you expect. I hope that you found this video to be helpful. Please like it, leave a comment below, and subscribe to my channel. I'm Dr. Bruce Hoag.